Hi there, welcome back to Transfer Talk. We're going to speak to French football expert now. Jonathan Johnson is in Paris for us. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks very much for having a chat. Let's get right into it. We've just been talking about Manuel Ugarte. We've seemed to have been talking about him for most of the month in terms of possibly going to Manchester United. Is there growing optimism now that a deal can be done between PSG and Man U?
Well, certainly there's still a feeling that PSG can and will let Ugarte go if a deal can possibly be reached with United. The main stumbling block this summer has been the fact that the two clubs' valuation of the player, it has been quite some way apart. But Ugarte wasn't involved in PSG's opening game of the season last week, so there is still a feeling that he is one of the players that the French champions will look to move on before the end of this transfer window. Obviously, a player that United remain interested in, and the dialogue has never really broken up between United and PSG this summer, given PSG's interest in Jadon Sancho as well.
Hi, Jonathan. Afternoon. Just on the theme of Manchester United, I mean, do PSG still want Jadon Sancho, or do you think they'll be looking elsewhere, or do you think they'll be happy with their squad?
I think the situation has changed a little bit after the opening game of the season. Gonzalo Ramos picking up an injury that's probably going to keep him out for a couple of months as opposed to a couple of weeks. And that now has prompted a bit of a rejig in terms of PSG's thinking. Are they still interested in Jadon Sancho's profile? Yes, he's a player they identified at the beginning of the summer who could possibly, fill their needs in the squad, and give them a real sort of right-sided presence in the attack. However, with this injury to Ramos, that means that there's no real possibility of moving Randall Colomwani on between now and the end of the transfer window, so they'll stick with him in the middle and now possibly look for somebody who might be a little more complementary. So the name Ademola Lookman of Atalanta has surfaced in recent days, and there's now speculation that he perhaps has moved slightly ahead of Sancho in PSG's pecking order.
Hi, Jonathan. Sticking with PSG, Carlos Soler is in talks with, West Ham are in talks with PSG to sign Carlos Soler at the moment. What would he bring to their midfield? They've obviously improved their midfield already this summer. Where would he fit into West Ham?
Yeah, Soler's a really interesting one because he's got quite a versatile profile. He's certainly played a number of positions since he joined PSG a couple of years ago. Unused substitute last week in PSG's opening game, but he did make the matchday squad. So I think there is a feeling that Luis Enrique could still use if he doesn't end up doing. However, Soler, in terms of what was expected from him at the very beginning of his time with PSG, I think many people expected him to be a very creative presence. He's been a bit more workmanlike than that, but that's also because of the way that he's been deployed by a number of different coaches. And I think West Ham would be getting somebody who is potentially a very creative player, if everybody remembers him at his best in Valencia back in La Liga. A really superb player, and many people felt that PSG were getting an absolute bargain back then. And although he has proved to be decent value in the fact that he could fit in a number of different positions, whether it's a more central midfield role, whether it's even at fullback or wingback at times, he is somebody who has added value to the squad. So I think the Hammers will be getting a very interesting type of player who could potentially fill a number of needs.
Moving on to Everton, there are reports linking Neil Maupay with a move away. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, bad news for Marseille with a serious injury in the attacking ranks to Moubandia. So that means that Marseille will now be looking to make an attacking reinforcement. And Maupay has been sort of suggested as a bit of a low-cost approach, given that this has been quite a busy transfer window for Marseille so far. But they hit the ground running under Roberto De Zerbi in their opening game, really blowing out last season's surprise package Brest. And there has also been speculation that they're making a move on Norwich's Jonathan Rowe. That speculation isn't anything new. It's been around for a couple of weeks now, and it feels like Rowe is perhaps the main priority for Marseille at this moment in time, with Maupay possibly being the player that they pivot to if it continues to be problematic for the Norwich man.
Jonathan, we saw Tottenham in action last night, first Monday Night Football of the season. Just wondering, with a few weeks left to go of the window, could there be one more incoming, do you think, for Spurs?
Yeah, there's a name that's certainly started to surface over here in France, and that's Monaco's Van der Sar, primarily a right back, right wing back. So definitely one to watch between now and the end of the window. Whether or not Monaco would feel that they can move him on and potentially move for somebody else to sort of fill in, that remains to be seen. But he's definitely a player that Monaco sort of wouldn't stand in the way of leaving if a suitable offer did arrive from the likes of the Tottenham.
Finally, Jonathan, just a quick word on Thierry Henry. He has resigned as the France under-21 boss. Why is that? Is there another move potentially on the cards?
Yeah, this one's a curious one because obviously he hasn't been in the position or hadn't been in the position for a terribly long time, although there was always a feeling that it was very much an appointment made for the Olympic Games, and he took the French team all the way to the final. They ended up as silver medalists, of course. There was speculation as well linking Henry with the US MNT, the US men's national team position. So that is something that has died off a little bit, obviously, since the Mauricio Pochettino taking that position has cropped up on the radar. So there is now a feeling that perhaps with his reputation at managerial level restored a little bit, that Henry could be perhaps looking at a return to the club game. But there was always a feeling, I think, that with Zinedine Zidane the obvious choice to replace Didier Deschamps at the head of the French national team after the 2026 World Cup cycle, that this was one for Henry to potentially get himself back into the managerial game and possibly put himself back on the market after the Olympics, which now seems to be the case.
Great stuff, very informative as ever. Thank you very much, Jonathan. One of the stories that you might be keeping up with is this one, because Wolves are in talks with Arsenal over the signing of goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale. They're exploring a loan with an option to buy. Arsenal, though, want to do a permanent deal, or at least a loan that comes with an obligation to buy. Ajax remain interested in Ramsdale. They had a loan offer rejected earlier this month, and Arsenal are working on potential replacements if Ramsdale was to leave. They've explored the conditions of a deal for Espanyol's Juan Garcia. Right, this is interesting, isn't it? First of all, from Wolves' point of view, they've got a settled number one, Jose Sarr. So Ramsdale's only going to go there if he's going to be number one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting when you look at Wolves because, of course, this window, they've recouped over £90 million signing their captain, Maximilian Kilman, and also Pedro Neto going to Chelsea. And I think the question around Wolves has been how are they going to invest some or a lot of that money that they've recouped. You look at Jose Sarr, he's been their number one for the last 3-4 seasons. I think over the last 12 months, it's fair to say he has been linked with moves away from the club. Whether there's been any kind of concrete evidence of that, we'll wait and see. But I think when you look at Wolves' squad, would you have said maybe a number one is what they would be looking for immediately? I think Gary O'Neill will be looking at centre-back and also midfield to beef up that squad. But is Aaron Ramsdale an upgrade on Jose Sarr? On balance, you would say yes. And I also think perhaps another consideration is, I think Gary O'Neill's looking to play a back four this season, and maybe Aaron Ramsdale, especially with how good he is with his feet, perhaps gives them a bit more ability to play out from the back and perhaps change their style of play. We saw last season they played a lot of counter-attacking football with pace. I think they're going to try and transition that this season if they can. I think Aaron Ramsdale will really help them do that.
Yeah, I think if you look at it from Ramsdale's point of view, he definitely needs a move somewhere. And I think if he's guaranteed to go to Wolves and be number one, he probably jumps at that chance, doesn't he? Because he's had a wasted season, essentially a season that probably would have taken him by surprise. I don't think he would have expected at the start of last season to be ousted from number one and Arsenal to have brought in a goalkeeper of the calibre of David Raya. And in fairness, we all debated whether the two number ones thing could work. I think from Arsenal's perspective, they've upgraded with David Raya. But you can't just keep having Ramsdale on the bench season after season. He's too good a goalkeeper and a goalkeeper that's an England international and will have eyes on being England's number one at some point. So I agree with you in the fact that from a Wolves perspective, I would have thought they would have had other priorities. But what you've said about the switch of system, and Gary O'Neill's a very intelligent manager, he'll know that he's lost some big players over the last few years. And if he thinks if changing goalkeeper can change maybe the way that Wolves play and maybe get those extra 2-3% out of the team, he'll do it. But he'll only do it. That Arsenal will only accept that if it's an obligation to buy.
Would Wolves not be falling into a similar trap to what Arsenal were in, though? In that if they keep Sarr, you've got two number ones there.
I mean, I'm sure, Gary O'Neill and Matt Hobbs, the technical director, sporting director at Wolves, they've talked all summer about planning for moves that have happened. So when Kilman was sold, they were planning ahead of that. When Neto was sold as well. So I think this Ramsdale news will only be with the view that they have a plan for Jose Sarr, whether that's to contend for the number 1 jersey or they know that Jose Sarr could be potentially on the way out. We'll wait and see. But if this happens, I mean, what a statement signing from Wolves. I mean, I don't think there's probably been a signing like this, if it does happen, for Wolves fans to be this excited about for a long time, I think.
I think Wolves have got an excellent goalkeeping coach, Neil Cutler, as well, who was previously at Villa, and I saw firsthand what he did for Emi Martinez. Look at what Emi Martinez did with Neil Cutler as a goalkeeper coach. Neil Cutler improves goalkeepers, and maybe it's the fact that Ramsdale's maybe a little bit more malleable than Jose Sarr. They're at kind of different points in their career, aren't they? So I think that's a goalkeeper that I think Neil Cutler would work very well with, the goalkeeping coach.
Dare I ask the question, Carve? Any more incomings at Chelsea?
Yeah, I think there will be. I think once Chelsea complete a deal for João Felix, they will focus on trying to sign a new striker, a new number 9. I think they accept that is what Enzo Maresca needs, and that was obvious watching the game against Manchester City on Sunday. Chelsea needs somebody like Erling Haaland. OK, you're not going to get somebody as good as him, but they need somebody in that mould. Kind of player they've had in the past.
Didier Drogba.
Diego Costa. Chelsea
I loved Didier Drogba. Just putting it out there. I loved him.
They need somebody with a bit of personality, a character, with a bit of physicality.
Fear.
Somebody who scores a lot of goals, somebody the fans can connect with. Now, somebody who ticks a lot of those boxes is the African Player of the Year, Victor Osimhen. We know he's been frozen out at Napoli. We know he wants to leave. We know Napoli are open to selling him. We also know that Chelsea are interested in signing him. But the latest information we have today is that Chelsea will not be signing him on a permanent deal as things stand. So Chelsea potentially only interested in a loan deal, but we already know that the player and his representatives are not interested in him going out on loan. They're saying if he's to leave Napoli, it has to be on a permanent deal. But I don't think Chelsea want to do a permanent deal at the moment because of the size of the transfer fee and also his wages. And the same goes for PSG as well. Every time people talk about Victor Osimhen, they go, he's going to leave Napoli, he's going to go to Chelsea or PSG. Well, PSG held talks about signing him earlier this summer, but they've moved on. They've signed other players. They've spent about 150 million euros, plays in other positions. And I think they looked at Osimhen. I'm not sure Luis Enrique looked at him and said he's my top target as a forward. And also the overall size of the package, again, was too much for them. And Napoli are pretty difficult, maybe, to negotiate with. Okay. And that is not a criticism, because their president, Mr. De Laurentiis...
They're tough, are they?
They're tough. He always defends Napoli. He does what's in Napoli's interest. So I think for those reasons that I've just gone through, PSG and Chelsea would like him, but not for the numbers being quoted. I think Chelsea definitely would like to take him on loan, but we have to wait until we get closer to the deadline to see what Chelsea and Napoli can negotiate, if in fact they do negotiate something. And also we know that Romelu Lukaku is pretty close to moving in the opposite direction to Napoli as well.
What you can guarantee with Brentford is that they know exactly what they're doing in the transfer window and they have got every eventuality planned out. But let's not rewrite history. Ivan Toney has scored plenty of goals, but I'm going to show you why Brentford might just be fine without him. First, though, we have to go back. He really has been a focal point of the Brentford attack. Toney scored 34.5% of Brentford's goals in 22-23, behind some big names, only Harry Kane and Erling Haaland. The only problem is this wasn't last season. That's the season before last, and Brentford have had to cope without him because of his ban. So let's take a look at how they've got on over the last year with and without Ivan Toney. Remember, he returned in January for the final 17 games of the season. Brentford won more games, scored more goals per game. They also conceded fewer goals per game, and they had a much higher win percentage and also collected, on average, more points per game as well. So it seems like they've done pretty well. Thomas Frank had to shuffle things around without Toney and finished the season 13 points clear of the bottom three. Staying up was a successful season for Brentford last year. Can they do the same again this time around? It's understood Al Ahly are the team that want to sign him, and they've already made significant signings in the last couple of years as well. Edouard Mendy, Roberto Firmino, Riyad Mahrez and Franck Kessié as well could all be new teammates for the striker. We know that Ivan Toney has been a man in demand, and he gave a round of interviews in January saying he wanted to win titles and wanted to be competing at the very top of the table. So where does this leave him now?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, look, he could join some good players in Saudi Arabia, no doubt. But surely there's a Premier League club out there that would want to sign Ivan Toney. He's
Well, if we turn the clocks back to sort of a year ago, that conversation was very much at the forefront. Arsenal really linked to him. That didn't materialise, of course, and you're looking at other Premier League teams, but it leaves them in limbo because we did hear there from Paul Gilmore in terms of the valuation hasn't been met and he's got a year left on his contract. So we're not privy to know exactly what that bid was and why it was turned down. But maybe that's what's putting off a lot of Premier League clubs as it stands. I mean, if you're looking at the window drawing to a close, you're maybe predicting Premier League clubs could come in a few days before the end of the window and test Brentford's resolve. They know that he's only got a year left and Brentford need to sell Ivan Toney. But if we just go through some of the traditional top six sides, as you say, I mean, let's start at Arsenal. Second top scorers in the league last year, conceded the fewest goals.
a lot of people say they need a striker.
Absolutely. Some people, depending on your opinion on Arsenal, some people say they'll be absolutely fine without one. They need to tweak in other areas. Other Arsenal fans will say absolutely, but maybe Toney's not the answer. But for me, definitely would help Arsenal be a stronger outfit, a good alternative to Kai Havertz through the middle or Jesus, completely different to both of those two players. But Mikel Arteta seems to have almost certainly gone in a different direction. If you're looking at Spurs, they've just had a huge outlay on Dominic Solanke. There was in pounds there, so that's what Ange's preference is and how he wants to play. At Liverpool, I don't think there's much point even discussing that with Jota and Darwin Núñez not even getting a look in at the minute. Manchester United have opted for younger profiles. They're going in a completely different direction and also the price point as well. Newcastle, fairly settled with Alexander Isak. Yes, in terms of Callum Wilson, there's injury concerns there, but Ivan Toney's going to want to go to another. Going to be the main man, and the clubs that we've just discussed there, it's not going to happen. So it leaves Ivan with very few options, and whilst we don't know what the valuation is that needs to be met, also limits his options too.
Yeah, but then if you're Ivan Toney and you go to Saudi Arabia, is it not a little bit early in your career? Are you not then potentially cutting short your career at the top level of club football?
It'd be a really big decision for him to make. I think it's important to state that there are clubs interested in signing Ivan Toney, but they'd be more interested in signing him for free next summer. Dave spoke about some of the quotes in many interviews he's given, speaking about his ambition to challenge for titles. But with Brentford wanting such a significant fee this summer, with Ivan Toney's wage demands and with Ivan Toney wanting to fight for titles, it leaves you with very few options that can match his ambitions and match what Brentford want in this transfer window. So with that in mind, the Saudi Pro League becomes potentially the only avenue in this transfer window. His argument may be, I can spend another year at Brentford, I can't be sold against my will, play another year at Brentford, score plenty more goals, keep Brentford in the top flight, and then leave for free next summer. Clearly Brentford may not want that to be the case because a player they bought for £5.5 million, they want to make some profit on him if he's not going to sign a new contract at the club. Fascinating situation he's in. Maybe he may think this may be the best option and then next summer assess his options again. Of course, there is the tax implications if he's to come back from Saudi Arabia early if he goes there. But at this point in his career, that could be the only option in this window because, as Flex has really well pointed out, in terms of top six clubs, there doesn't feel like there's any avenue in this window. It seems unlikely unless Arsenal could get a really cut price fee at the end of the transfer window whether they'd be interested or not.
Well, give his agent some hope. Come on, how about around Europe?
I think around Europe's difficult because I think you look at, say, Germany, they wouldn't be able to put that kind of money on the table. Harry Kane, I've heard, is pretty good, so I think Bayern are all right for a centre forward. Spain as well. But I think what's interesting is just the point that Jones made, actually, about Brentford want to make a big profit on him. Well, they can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, we want to make a profit, but you set it at a level where clubs aren't going to come in.
Yeah.
And then you can't moan a year later when he leaves on a free because you priced him out of a move. So you've got to be really... That's not me having a dig at Brentford, but I just think in general, clubs do have to be quite careful with that because players are very, very aware of the power they have now once you get towards that final year of your contract. And so, you know, around Europe, just to go back to your question, clubs are being very risk averse. They're not spending enormous amounts of money unless, you know, Bayern can do that, for example. Not many others can. And you look, there's a handful of clubs around Europe. PSG, Gonzalo Ramos has just been injured. They seem to be looking at other options. And we'll talk about those later. But I think clubs are being very careful.
Okay. All right. Well, stay tuned because it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Ivan Toney over the next few days.
Man United transfer news live, Manuel Ugarte's future, Adrian Rabiot links, and the latest on Jadon Sancho. Stay updated with the latest news, insights, and transfer rumors surrounding Manchester United, brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. United has already secured the signings of Lenny Yoro from Lille, Joshua Zirkzee from Bologna, and former Bayern Munich duo Matthijs de Ligt and Noussair Mazraoui. However, their transfer activity is far from over, and new arrivals could still be on the horizon before the transfer window closes next week on August 30th. One of the standout names this summer is Manuel Ugarte, with United determined to finalize a deal. Sander Berge was also on their radar, but he has since agreed to move from Burnley to Fulham. On the outgoing side, Academy graduate Will Fish has agreed to join Cardiff City in the Championship, and Uruguayan winger Facundo Pellistri has completed his transfer to Panathinaikos, as United continues to streamline their first-team squad. Meanwhile, Jadon Sancho and Scott McTominay continue to attract interest. McTominay is in the final year of his contract at Old Trafford, though United holds an option to extend it by another year. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the latest news, opinions, and transfer updates.